All right, welcome everyone. This is class for Noahide Nations on Noahide. I want to welcome everyone. Holding by the Noahide laws, and we spoke a few weeks back. Last week was a washout, but we spoke a few weeks back about end of life issues. Right, complicated. Right, complicated. Issues. What to do. God forbid a person has a parent, let's say dying, or what you're allowed to do, not allowed to do, etc. So now, since after we spoke about this, what do you call it, positive, non-depressing topic, so now we're going to speak about the aftermath. Person died, right? Death, burial, other issues, and we'll see things that either apply, right, or do not, or maybe don't apply to Noahides. So for Jews, the laws of death and burial, a lot of detail, right? Jews have no problem. We have no problem obligating people, certainly, to do things. A lot of obligations, a lot of details. Many of these laws are rabbinic, but they are predicated on values expressed in the written Torah, beliefs in the nature of body and soul, faith in the eventual resurrection, afterlife, etc. So I've been trolled lately by someone who, only wants to listen to God. Right? Forget what the rabbis say. They make it up. They this, they that. The other things. But finally, I just say, listen, Leviticus chapter 17. Leviticus chapter 17 says you got to listen, to the Kohanim, to the Levites in every generation. And if you don't listen to them, whatever they say, right is left, left is right. What's the obligation over here if you don't? What's the punishment? Death penalty. So I said, you got to listen to them. The rabbis are the, Kohanim of every generation. The person comes back and says, no, they were closer to God. They knew how to interpret. They knew this, they that. The rabbis just, whatever. They don't even get their things from the Torah. They make it up as they go along. So my last answer was, actually, there are many things. There are many things that they say that, where's the base in the Torah? I mean, not everything, right? But they put a verse on many, many things. They can't say none of it. It's a little bit of an exaggeration. They make it up. They don't claim anything in the Torah. Not true. So a lot of these laws, why do I bring this up? Because a lot of these laws of death and mourning are rabbinic. I remember I was in mourning for my father 8 years ago. And basically, there are a lot of different customs. Some people do this, some people do that, some people do the other thing. Right? You always have who to rely on. Right? Again, there are a lot of different customs what people do. But it's, when it comes to death, what's pretty important over here is one of the 13 principles of the Rambam. One of the 13 principles is resurrection. All the 13 principles Jews have to believe in. Non-Jews probably the first one that, there is a God and he's unique in the world, right? He's absolute, etc. They don't necessarily have to believe in reward and punishment or resurrection or, prophecy. It's a good thing, but doesn't necessarily mean they have to. For a Jew, they have to believe in what the Rambam says, right? In the 13 principles. And if they don't, they're not really considered Jewish unless they repent, right? That's how severe they are, right? So belief in the nature of body and soul, faith, eventual resurrection, a lot of this Kabbalah, by the way, right? We spoke about it in Derech Hashem, right? In the way of God, how the body and soul works. The fight between body and soul, and reincarnation, and all these things. So Noahides don't have any specific commandments there on treatment of the dead. That's probably pretty shocking to most people. But non-Jews doesn't say anything, right? Doesn't say anything in the Torah. But there are values. There are values, obviously, where Jewish values, the values come from the Torah. That would apply, right? Seemingly would apply to Noahides. Even though you'll tell me, but Isn't it true they don't have specific religious duties? Right, to Noahide? It's true. Right, that is definitely true. Nonetheless, Noahides are guided by what? They're guided by Torah. Right, they're guided by the beliefs in the Torah itself. Now, there are a lot of verses in the Torah, in Tanakh, in general, that imply their burial practices, even for non-Jews. Right, even for Noahides. Now, interesting enough, you'll say, okay, does that obligate me? Does that obligate a Noahide over here? The answer is no. It doesn't actually obligate them. But reference to burial and treatment of the dead are discussed at length and also in the Torah. Right? And a lot of Torah literature as well. Now, if we go through all these sources, we'd be here for a good number of hours. And we're not going to do that. But nonetheless, we're going to give an overview. Right? We'll give an overview over here. And, then we'll see where it goes. So, first of all, we have to understand a person is made up of body and soul. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. Then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Man became a living soul. Right? Means if we don't have the soul, we die. Non-Jews, Noahides, they have a soul. They also have a soul. Everyone's creating God's image. They may not have the same soul makeup as the Jew, but they definitely have a soul. So we understand we are a hybrid of physicality, i.e., God made man from the dust of the four corners of the earth. Right? But he breathed in the spirit of life. What's the spirit of life? The soul. Right? So we're like God in that sense. We have a soul. Right? The Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, where does the soul come from? From God's heavenly throne, whatever that means. Right? It's a part of God. The body, though, comes from the earth, like we said. Dense, physical, entirely material. Now, the Ramchal says in Derech Hashem, what should happen is the soul is so powerful. When the soul goes in the body should really explode. And the person should just be a pure soul. But what happens? The body comes from the earth. The earth is tummy. Right? The earth is impure. So the body is made from the physical earth. The soul goes in the body. Now what happens to the soul? Gets trapped. Totally trapped. So it can't shine. When's the only time? Ray, I'm going to give a test over here. I don't want anyone to fail, whoever took that class. Right? When is the only time that spiritual soul is going to shine? There's only one time. There's only one time. Let's say better. There's only one place it's going to shine. That's in the spiritual world. Oh, sorry, I gave you the answer. In the world of souls, where the soul's going to wait, till there's, Olam Haba, the next world, and all that. Whenever all that's supposed to take place. So there's a conflict always between body and soul. Body wants to go after physicality. The soul wants to go after spirituality. How is the soul going to go after spirituality? Torah, mitzvahs. When we do mitzvahs, we uplift the soul. We uplift the body. When we go against what God wants, we debase the body, we debase the soul. So God determines a person's time, that a person's gonna come to this world, the soul's gonna come. And then the soul's gonna return back to its spiritual existence, whenever that's gonna be. Some people will be younger, some people will be older. We don't know. Nobody knows. I will mention one thing that most people probably know. There was a terrorist attack here in Israel last week. And so my Rebbe spoke about it. And one of the things he said is, it's tragic. It's a wake-up call. But at the end of the day, whenever a person's supposed to be taken, it doesn't matter when. God can do it in many ways. God's got many messengers. Right? He can take a person in their sleep. He can take a person, very old, and they go through certain suffering, whatever it is. They can take, God can take a person kind of nasty way, right? They get murdered, butchered, who knows? So a person will say, well, we're going to speak about this more, in philosophical class, right, about suffering, but I just want to point out that the idea is there's no such thing as wrong place, wrong time. In other words, you're there, let's say people are on a bus and God forbid, bus goes up or a bus goes over, whatever the case is. A lot of people are injured, people killed. God orchestrated for all those people to be on that bus. Certainly that we're supposed to die. Why? Can't answer. But they're liable for death penalty. Right? Or even better, they have to die. So God picks a way how they're going to die. We don't have a choice. The Mission Pirkei Avos says in ethics for our fathers, we're born against our will, we die against our will. In parentheses, Coffman would say you still have to live. Right? But, do we have any say who our parents are? No. Siblings? No. Socioeconomic situation? No. We don't have any choice. Zero choice. We're not asked. God has to control the soul to go into the body. Right? To go down to this world. The soul doesn't want to go. Makes sense. Basking in God's glory upstairs. Or God forbid suffering also. But in either case, God's going to put the soul in the body. And at some point, God's going to take the soul from the body. So here, Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, the Torah says, by sweat of your brow, you're going to eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of you were taken your dust, and dust shall you return. What's that verse talking about? Verse is talking about after Adam and Eve ate from the tree. So basically, if Adam and Eve had not eaten from the tree, as Ramchal says, and we'll reference Derech Hashem again, they would have gone straight into paradise, into Gan Eden, in Garden of Eden. That's it. World would have got what the world was created for that purpose. That purpose is finished. That's it. It's the end of the world. But that didn't happen. So God had to go to plan B. What was plan B? Plan B is what a man eats from the tree. If a man eats from the tree, God has to send him out of the garden. Why? Because once in the middle of the garden, or on the side of the garden, whatever it is, tree of life. What if Adam and Eve had eaten from the tree of life? Right? Fame. They're going to live forever. Well, guess what? They can't live forever. Death is part of atonement process. So death is not a Jewish concept. Never was a Jewish concept, but Adam and Eve ate from the tree. Repercussions. So this verse is telling you you're going to go back to the dust. Why? You have to work, by the sweat of your brow. Why? Because you blew it. You ate from the tree. You weren't supposed to eat from the tree. That's it. So now God had to bring death to the world. Then we have to work hard. Everything was given to Adam and Eve on a platter. Now we got to work hard, right, to make a living. Now, what does this verse tell me? This verse just says you go back to the dust. Now, does it say anything about burying the dead? Doesn't say that. Right? We learn that from Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23. We don't learn it over here. Here it just describes the natural decay of the body. That's part of atonement. You have to go into the ground. Can't be buried in a mausoleum. Right? You have to go. A Jew certainly has to go in the ground. People that are buried, let's say in a mausoleum, if they're Jewish, big problem. They can't get atonement. The atonement process is they're in the ground. Gotta get eaten by bugs and worms and all that. And then your soul gets judged, but that's part of the atonement process. Part of it. Now, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, 27 tells me God said, let us make man in our image. After our likeness. God created man in his own image. The image of God, he created him. Created he him. So, interesting enough, God, angels, they don't have any form. Right? We can only see what God is not. And I remember when I was a kid, and this happens, probably all over the world. Someone will ask, draw a picture of God. What does the person draw? What do they draw? They draw a picture of an old man, the long white beard, sitting on a throne, maybe with a crown on his head. God has no image. Angels have no image. So the $2 million question is, what does it mean over here? Why does it say image and likeness? Rashi says, what does it mean after our likeness? What does that mean? That man, unlike any other creature, any other creation, is similar to his creator. He has the ability to understand and discern. The Aramaic translation of breathing in the spirit of life is a ruach mamala. What is a ruach mamala? The ability to speak. Doesn't mean just to speak. Animals also speak, but we don't understand their language, right? We're not playing. Maybe I'll play Dr. Doodle. We don't. Know what they say, what animals say over here. But at the same time, they also have the ability to speak. But we're not talking about speech here. The ruach mamala, the Aramaic translation, means to understand, to make decisions. So you're going to say, well, animals make decisions. They can choose to eat, not to eat, this, that. They could. That doesn't mean they have free will like we do. Animals are programmed DNA. That's what they are. 100%, they're programmed DNA. So there's no other creation like us. That we have the ability to make decisions. We have free will. So it says God created man in his image, but God doesn't have an image. So it means God created man in the form that he made for him. Everything else was created with a commandment. Let there be light. Let there be this. Let there be that. Whereas God created man with his own hands. Because it says in Psalms 139 verse 5, says King David, you placed your hand upon me. Man was made with a stamp like a coin, which is made by means of a die, i.e., right? That's from Midrash Tehillim. Gemara Sanhedrin 38:8. Rashi brings this down also. It's like God made a form, like a coin, and then he just coined everybody. They're all the same, right? Some are going to be male, some are going to be female. Some today, they don't know what they are, right? They have no idea what they are, but they're either male or female, bottom line. No matter what they feel they are, right? They're either male or female. Right? So God, over here, made man. What does it mean? In the image of God, he created them. That there were images that were prepared for him, the image of the likeness of his creator. Now, what does Rashi learn? What's he telling us? What's he telling us over here? As we said before, we are unique among all creations in two ways. One is we have the ability to make decisions. Good decisions, bad decisions. Right? To understand, discern, create. So that means the nature of the human soul and the mind. Right? We can be creative. We can think. Overthink. Make decisions. That's the first thing. Second, we're made in God's image. In the image of God. Animals are not. Plants are not. Other things are not. So here it says, b.Tselem Elokim. What is Tselem over here? Kind of a difficult word to translate. But what does Tselem mean? It can mean a diagram. It can mean a picture. It can be a mold. So what is Rashi telling you? So Rashi explains, God himself designed, shaped, and formed man himself. Did it all by himself. Made the mold, shaped man, etc. All other elements of creation came what we call ex nihilo, from nothing, something from nothing. It was a verbal command. God said, let there be light. And there was light. Only one problem with that verse, just throw this out there. Right, God says, let there be light. Very beginning of Genesis. What's the obvious problem? No light. Right? We don't have the sun. When's the sun created? Day 4. So what happened? So what was that light? So that light, Rashi says, according to Kabbalah, was the future light. It's going to be used for the righteous in the world to come. Right? But, the question is, okay. You can say, let there be light, very good, but there's no light source till day 4. All these other things are created by let there be, by a command. By man, didn't say that. Rashi says man was created by God's own hands. Even though God doesn't really have hands, it's anthropomorphism over here. So the likeness of God here is what is spiritual, because we can't call it physical. So we have to call it spiritual. The creative aspects of man and the image or design is what our physical aspect. Now, once the soul is taken from the body, what happens? You die. That's exactly what happens. The body remains in the form that God gave it. Now, we're not going to get gross over here. Let's say it's intact. Right? The body's totally intact. Okay. So basically, that body is a mold. And every body's the same. Right? It's the same mold. And that God gave as a special love for him. Right? Because it's brought down Pirkei Avos, chapter 3, Mishnah 14 or Mishnah 13, that, according to some versions, Rabbi Kiva would say, man is beloved because he's created in the image of God. It's an even greater love that was made known to mankind. As it says, the image of God was man created. So what's the body? What does the body represent? Testimony of God's love and handiwork. God's mold, so to speak. So the body itself is created by God. You can't use it for scientific experimentation. It's holy. You have to have respect for the body. Now again, even if that's true, does that create liability or obligation? No. But it's a value. It's a value when we make arrangements for someone who died. You got to treat the person with respect. Not a science project over here. You can't just carve them up, for scientific experimentation. Or we're going to see now about doing autopsies. Autopsies normally, forbidden under Jewish practice. Not, totally not respectful. It's like you're using the body as a piece of flesh. But the fact is, God created the body. So the body has a certain level of holiness. It's got to treat it with respect. Now, what about non-Jews? What about Noahides? Now, not necessarily prohibited over here. It does go against Torah values. And it should be discouraged unless there's an absolute need. So for a Jew, under certain circumstances, to be allowed to do autopsies. Here in Israel, beginning the founding of the state, they were notorious. Secular Jews for doing autopsies. For religious Jews, would risk their lives going into the morgue at night, middle of the night, stealing the bodies and burying them. That's how severe the prohibition is. Right? They risk their lives for that. But that's a desecration of the body. Do an autopsy. For us, it doesn't matter why the person died. Right? Unless it's really extenuating circumstances. It doesn't matter. We have a saying over here in Israel, that they say that the surgery was successful, but the person died. In other words, you can have surgery that's successful, but there can be complications, other things. And the patient dies. Now, at the end of the day, what do we believe? We believe that's what's supposed to happen. God's the one in charge. See, someone I spoke about this at great length today. My earlier class, the book of Leviticus. Right? And so I had a troll there, but I want to put them in their place. And that was that doctors only have the ability to heal a flesh wound. Monty Python, anyone who wants to know. Flesh wound. If they do surgery and they sew the person up. Right? The Torah says in the book of Exodus, Rape Yirape. Right? At the end of the verse, it says, a doctor can surely heal. What can they heal? Rashi and others say they're only able to heal a flesh wound. A wound on the body. What about inside the body? Let's say they do surgery. They're going to say, I did that. I fixed the person up. But, a doctor has to be honest. And most doctors are not. They got egos bigger than, size of the universe plus. Say, I did this and I did that. And I'm the one in charge. That's why the Gemara says, Tov shebaroifim legehenim. Even the best of doctors go to hell. Why? One reason, because they think they're God themselves. Right? And they make the choices. They make the choice between life and death. Now, they open somebody up. They do open heart surgery, let's say. They close the person up. They put a few valves, whatever it is. Right? Definitely save the person's life. Okay. Do they know once they stitch the person up? Can they say with 100% certainty after they stitch them up, is it possible for them to say, everything's going to be fine? No, because they have no idea how the body's going to react. They'll tell you if the person's healthy, this should happen. Right? The person's not as healthy, other things can happen. Worst case scenario, this, that. Right? My point was, and I think they were just trolling me, but I made the point again. And that is, once a doctor does surgery, they stitch the person up. They have no control what's going to happen in the body. They can predict. Maybe they're right when they predict. Sometimes. But they don't know. They can't say for certainty this is going to happen. They don't know. It's impossible to know. Because after they stitch the person up, how do they know how the body's going to react? They don't. So autopsies go against Torah values. They look at the body, it's like a piece of meat. And if we're creating God's image, so the body is holy. Essentially, the body is holy. Right? So you're not allowed to do autopsies. Now again, for Noahides, it seems to be okay, but it does go against Torah values. What about delaying burial? Now, we Jews are prohibited from delaying burial because we want the person to go in the ground as quick as possible so they get judged. There's a lot of different things going on. The soul, doesn't know where to go, doesn't know what to do. It's a total state of flux. And the longer it's out of the body before it gets judged and taken to where it needs to go, is bad news for the soul. So we don't delay. But delays may be necessary, let's say, for the deceased and his honor. Let's say it's for his honor. The person's a great rabbi. They want to wait for people to come and whatever, and give eulogies. So these rules don't apply to Noahides, but you got to be respectful. You shouldn't leave the person unburied for a unessential period of time. Some say it's forbidden. It's forbidden to delay Noahide burial. Here in Israel, certainly in Jerusalem, if a person dies, they don't give him 24 hours. 24 hours maximum. From when that person died, he's in the ground. Or she's in the ground. Right? That's the custom in Jerusalem. They don't wait for nothing. That's it. That's the custom here. So we don't delay burial. Some people delay burial because family members can't get there. It's gonna take longer. So they wait. It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. The soul, as far as I understand, the soul suffers unbelievably in such a case. That's delaying burial. What about embalming? So God wanted the human body to return to its source. Wants to get eaten by worms and all that. Go back to the dust that it came from. Embalming, forbidden. Right? That's totally forbidden. Also, not respectful. Remember, anything not respectful over here to the body is going to be forbidden. Certainly for Jews. Right? Maybe forbidden for Noahides also. Now, what about cremation? Certainly forbidden for Jews. Right? But not for Noahides. But again, what's the problem? What's the problem? It's God's image over here. God made the mold. How can you take the mold and just burn it? So it's the destruction of God's handiwork. Should be discouraged, but doesn't necessarily have to be. The burial in the ground allows the body to decay. Here in Israel, you go straight in the ground. They put you on like a slab. You know, they put something in the grave to put the person on, and they basically drop the body in. Right? It's very graphic. You don't see it, but that's what happens. It goes straight into the ground. Outside of Israel, that's not the case. It goes in a casket. Right? It's going to go in a casket to allow the body to decay according to God's design. So a casket, we go in a plain box. Right? Very simple wooden box. And a casket is biodegradable. So many funeral homes offer plain wooden caskets, right? And often marked as traditional Jewish caskets. They break down over time. And they allow the body to decay and return to the earth. You got these fancier things, takes longer. Right? They're not made of wood, made of other things, but they have to go in the ground. A Jew has to go in the ground. So going in a casket is also going in the ground. Why? Because the casket is biodegradable. Noahides cannot be buried in a Jewish cemetery, right? Certainly a Jew can't be buried in a Christian cemetery or whatever. But it's forbidden from our side. And Jews are not allowed to bury non-Jews in Jewish cemeteries. Now, it may happen, but it's totally forbidden. But they can be buried anywhere else. You're gonna say, what about a Catholic cemetery, a Christian cemetery? I don't know if there's anything wrong with it. It's not idolatry. First, even though they practiced idolatry. But basically, they can be buried anywhere else. There are places that have non-sectarian. Be buried there. Now, what about a funeral service for Noahides? Right? What about a funeral service? There's no, set service for Noahides. Now, this, is kind of a problem. Why? Because Noahides are people that die, they would have a proper service over here. So, what do we do? Certainly, the service should not in any way allow for denial of the condition or reality of death. Right? It's got to be clear, what's going on. I mean, it's pretty obvious, I would think. Because if you deny, it's certainly going to be unhealthy. You're going to have long-term consequences, that's for sure. The service should allow for open mourning, crying for the deceased. Expressions of grief are okay, certainly important. Spiritually and psychologically. And if a person has unresolved or unexpressed grief, that could affect them long term. Definitely unhealthy. Right? Definitely unhealthy. What about eulogizing? Can you eulogize over here? Eulogizing the deceased by those close to them is important. Because it opens the hearts of those who are present and honor. Right? But you want to say, if a person's going to eulogize someone, you don't want to get up and say all the terrible things they did. They go against what the Torah says. I was at a mourner's house. It was after the funeral. I was at a mourner's house. They were saying, some guy walks in and tells the spouse, that's what, I remember, your husband buy all the shrimp and all the smorgasbords and all the, he's like, oh, I should probably have been saying this. I'm like, you idiot. I was like, the soul of that person is hovering in places where it knows. go back to where it lived or where his kids lived or whatever. Before it gets judged, imagine that soul is hearing that, doing somersaults, saying like, "You idiot! What are you talking about? You're killing me. You're killing me more," so to speak. So you got to eulogize, say what's good about the person. Then you got to say, what if the person doesn't have any redeeming qualities? Oh, I know some stories like that. Like nobody had anything good to say about the person. Like, how do you eulogize someone if you don't have anything good to say? But it should be an opportunity for closure, forgiveness, bury the hatchet, so to speak. Now, what about an open casket? Right, they allow the family to see the body before he's buried, before the person's buried, right? And that should be discouraged. Even for non-Jews. For Jews, the big problem because the body without a soul. But when you look at the body, you're not looking at the person. And the soul, as far as I understand, it's totally embarrassing for the soul. Because the soul is there. You can't see it. You can't hear it. But the soul is there and it sees the body, can't get back in the body. Right? So it's embarrassing for the soul. So you're not looking at a full person, you're looking at just a piece of flesh. So Orthodox Jews, we don't do open caskets. The Reform movement, conservative movements, yeah, they do whatever. They'll have a private showing, for the family. But a lot of times what they do is they make the person look better than they even did when they were alive. That's also forbidden. I've heard of stories, they like break certain bones on the person, right, in order to make them look better. I mean, that's like insane. They'll say, what do you care? You don't feel it anyway. Person's dead anyway. But you want to make them look good before they die. I don't know about that. Right, that's forbidden. That's definitely forbidden. And what about mourning? There are mourning customs. So the Jewish world, mourning customs are very developed. Right? They're emotional as well as spiritual health. And they're obligatory. For many things. Noahides do not have any obligations. No mourning customs. Right? Essentially, there are no mourning customs. So that's what has to be worked out, like, what they'd be allowed to do. But not, obviously, what Jews do. And Noahides as well, in earlier times, had some sort of set period of mourning. Right? Because it says, Genesis chapter 7, verse 4, another 7 days, I'll make it rain upon the earth, 40 days, 40 nights, I'll blot out all beings that I made on the face of the earth. The Gemara says on that, Sanhedrin 108b, explains that the flood was delayed for 7 days to allow mourning for the righteous Methuselah. Right, he lived 969 years. Because it says in another 7 days, the Rashi says, these are 7 days of mourning. Right, we have 7 days of mourning. You don't mourn on Shabbos, but certain things you can't do on Shabbos because of mourning. Right? Why? There were 7 days of mourning for the righteous Methuselah, whom the Holy One, blessed be He, showed honor by delaying punishment. So if you calculate the chronology of Methuselah, you'll find passed away in the 600th year of Noah's life. So you see over here, there's a precedent for observing 7 days of mourning for their dead. Right? So, that we'll have to see further. But as we mentioned a number of times, Noahides are not going to do things that are similar to Jews. We're not going to Judaize it over here. Right? So the question is, what exactly are they allowed to do? How are they allowed to do it? Right? So, that needs further clarification. Right? Because they're not going to do what we do. The question is, what should they do? Right? That's the question. Yeah. So any questions on any of that about body and soul? Created the image of God, going to the ground, autopsy, embalming, cremation, funeral service, any of that. Someone asked, Battle of Gog and Magog, they're just going to put bodies in the ground, the coffin will take 7 months. Yeah, it's gonna, I don't know, 7 months, 8 months, right? Whatever it is, it's going to take 8 months to bury people. 8 months. Right? The question is, they're going to go directly in the ground like they do here in Israel? Or they're going to have to get all these coffins also, right? Because a third of the world is going to get destroyed in one shot, Prophet says. A third is going to get injured, and a third, we're not sure. A third may survive, may not survive. Right? So they're going to go in the ground. Again, it seems that when it says over there it's going to take 7 months, well, so it can't be nuclear, not going to totally disintegrate. So they're going to have to bury them. They're going to bury them in the ground. Right? That's what it sounds like. Prophet there does not mention anything about a coffin. But who says it's not? Who says it won't be with a coffin? Maybe all the places was destroyed, they'll have to build them. Okay. Right, but who says they're going to go directly in the ground? Right? I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be any difference with that. Why should that change? Just because all these people died and whoever survived, survived, why would we change what we already did? In other words, if the halacha is, outside of Israel, they have to be buried in caskets, okay? And if they're in the land of Israel, they go straight in the ground, very good. I guess it depends where you are. Not everyone's going to be in the land of Israel, obviously. So if you're outside the land, you have to go in a casket. If you're in the land, you won't go in a casket. Right? But you're definitely going to go in the ground. The only question is, right, could be in a lot of places it'll be with a coffin. In Israel won't be. That's what I would say. Yeah. Any other questions on, on any of that? This, I think, is one of the hardest things for Noahides in general because, let's say they have family members that die and, they have a quote unquote religious service. Now you got a problem. Can't go into church. Right? And the question also is, there really are no mourning customs. Right? So the question is, what should a Noahide do? But, going to a service that's forbidden, that you can't do. If it's not a religious service, okay. Right? But if it's in a church, you can't go. And, this comes up a lot. And I've gotten this question a lot. What are you supposed to do? It's a religious service, you can't go. But I want to be there. But, it's something that goes against what the Torah says. It's hard, I agree. But, there's seemingly no way around it. But it comes up a lot. Because, as we said before, there are essentially not any customs, for mourning. Even though there's a precedent we see by Metushalach we mentioned. What doesn't mean, but okay, so maybe it's a 7-day period, so what do? You can say Tehillim, you can say Psalms, you can learn in the merit, okay. But essentially you can't do very much else, that we do, that Jews do. And it's, it's also very hard. Like, someone told me they had, they only held, secular Jews only held like a couple days of mourning instead of 7 days. It's supposed to be 7 days. Okay, it's like, a day and a half. So someone asked me, they said, how can you do it for 7 days? First of all, you don't sit on Shabbos. Right? You're not allowed to you don't mourn on Shabbos. At least on the outside, in many ways. But at the same time, people come every day. You don't have everybody at once. It's a whole different thing. You don't have 500 people at once. It'd be very hard. So you got people come in the morning, you got people come in the afternoon. You have certain hours when people can come. It's draining, 100%. But it's not like you're having 450 people in one shot. That's a whole different thing. That is hard. So we break it up over 7 days. It's hard enough. It's hard enough. You can't do anything. You got to sit there. You can't learn. I mean, you can only learn things that have to do with mourning, but you really can't learn. Right? It's hard. Very hard. Ray over here mentions a lot of latitude. Yeah. There's latitude, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful because you don't want to straddle both worlds. You want to make it where Noahide's going to have their own thing, whatever, but they shouldn't be similar to what we do in general. There'll also be different traditions due to a country's culture. Yeah. You got to be careful, though. Like, certain things could be based on, I don't know, idolatry or other things that may be forbidden. So, you got to see. You got to see what you can do, over here. But, yeah, that's definitely true. That is definitely true. Sometimes we have more questions than answers. Can a Noahide, sit for a number of days? They could. 100%. Can they light a candle in their memory? They can. Can they say Tehillim? Can they say Psalms? Can they learn in their memory? They can. Right? But it's not going to be the same. It's definitely not going to be the same. Right? But there's comfort with that. And you have to know how to visit somebody who's in mourning. One of the laws for us is a person's mourning, you don't speak to them. You let them speak first. Right? You have to let them speak. When they speak, then you can speak. You also have to know how to comfort someone. I was telling over one of my classes about in Perkei Avos that Pesach Kron should be well. Tells a story. It tells a story. Someone went to visit the sick. We spoke. I think I spoke this a few weeks ago, right? And person comes in to try and cheer up the person. Like, oh, you're so lucky. It's freezing cold outside. You're nice and warm in here. You get 3 square meals. You don't have to worry about these other things. Meanwhile, the nurses come running in. It's like, I don't know what you said. What you're saying to this patient, but the monitors are going berserk. You're going to kill the person. Like, get out. You have to know how to comfort someone also. A person can't just visit when the other person doesn't want them, or they're tired, or they're sleeping, or whatever. It takes a little bit of wisdom to know what to do. Comforting, though, again, when you comfort someone, you don't speak to them until they speak to you. That's show respect over here, because they're the ones in mourning. They're the ones suffering. You have to. Part of it is you have to let them get it out. Let them say. That's part of the mourning process, to digest what happened, etc. Yeah. Any other questions? Or any general questions? All right, if there are no questions, then I'm going to sign out. Anyone has any questions, feel free. You can shoot me an email. Otherwise, I'm going to sign out. Wish everyone a good middle of the day or almost end of the day for me. And everyone have a great rest of the week.